Thank you very much, Daisy. You've got me a little bit worried because I'm starting to wonder now, will I be able to fly home this evening? Good. Glad to hear it. You might be stuck with me in London. That would be terrible. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Maria Jennings, and I have the privilege of being the Director for Regulatory Compliance at the Food Standards Agency. And I'm going to focus about the next 20 minutes or so completely on food safety regulation, how we regulate, what we might be doing right, what we might be doing wrong, and how we see things moving and changing, and how we believe regulation should be taken forward. And when I talk about regulation, I'm mainly talking about public sector regulation and the framework that sits around our official controls. But also, of course, there is private sector assurance, and that really fits in with the model that we're talking about going forward. So just to give you a little bit of background, a little bit of context, I've qualified as an environmental health practitioner in 1990, so I have been an environmental health practitioner for 30 years. For 10 of those years, I worked in various local authorities in Northern Ireland. And then I joined the Food Standards Agency when it was just setting up. The Belfast office was just setting up. I have been there for 20 years. So I never really considered myself a civil servant. But it's the FSA's 20th anniversary this year, and I think I probably should just admit defeat and say that now I am probably a civil servant. So for about the last 7 years or so, I have been the director for the FSA's operation in Northern Ireland, and I always talk about that office as being like a mini FSA. We just run the administration of the food safety system in Northern Ireland. But about a year and a half ago, I was given a huge opportunity. You could call it a hospital pass, but I was asked to head up the team in London, the regulatory compliance team, and given the responsibility for being the senior responsible official within the FSA for the regulating our future programme, which was a programme of modernisation of regulatory controls. And it was an interesting time to come into that programme, because actually it had been running for about 2 years. And we started, when we kicked off the modernising regulation programme in the FSA, it was, we were in a space where we wanted to run it as an agile programme. So we went out and we said, look, we don't have any of these answers. We want to hear all the opinions, we want to hear all the views, and we want to work together with the regulators, with business and with others to try and figure out what the best framework for regulation will be, and look at all of these challenges that we're facing. We need to change this regulatory system. So I sort of think back on it and think it was actually like a big, huge hopper, and we threw loads of things into that hopper. But then, as I came into the programme, what we had to do was we had a tap that we needed to switch on that was about how the FSA becomes fit for purpose as we exit the European Union. So there was a very different we had to start to have very different conversations about what the FSA needed to do to become fit for purpose, to stand alone outside the umbrella of the European Union as a central competent authority, with actually the world looking in on us and looking at our official control regime and scrutinising it. So that was, it has turned into the modernisation programme has turned into a very different, we have very different drivers for it. So for the next 20 minutes or so, I'm going to tell you about some of the things that we've been working on and what we've achieved, and then I'm going to talk to you a little bit then about what is left to do. What are the things that we think we really need to be concentrating on for the next 2 years or so. So we set out with a a list of 5 principles, and actually nobody can argue with these principles. The principles remain as important today as they were when we started the programme. Of course, businesses are responsible, and we all know that they're responsible for producing food that's safe and what it says it is. And business should well be able to demonstrate that. And also, customers, consumers should have the information that they need to make those informed choices about the food that they buy and eat. The FSA's role and our regulatory partners, mainly local authorities, those decisions that are taken should be tailored and proportionate and based on a clear picture of the UK and all the food businesses. That actually was very challenging because information about food businesses is retained at local authority level. So as you know, there are about 400 local authorities across the UK, and they all have information about the businesses in their own local authority area. We did not have oversight of that, and we didn't have a view of the whole system, and I'll talk a little bit about that as I go through the presentation. Regulators taking account of all available sources of information. Again, a really bland statement, but how challenging is that to do? And then businesses that are doing the right things should be recognised, and then action should be taken against those who are not doing the right things. Businesses should meet the cost of regulation, and we have had an awful lot of conversations in the FSA about subsidising the industry. And that mainly happens actually in the FSA's own controls that take place in meat plants, abattoirs, cutting plants, on milk, dairy farms and milk premises. So that we do, but I think we've come to the conclusion that we really can't change that on our own. It's going to take a more concerted, I suppose, agreement by ministers, etc., to decide on what sort of fair, sensible way businesses could pay for all of the regulation and the framework for the official controls. So I'll not talk too much more about money. Just then to tell you a little bit about what we've done up until now and why we have been, I suppose, prioritising the things that we have been. We have put in place an online digital registration service for businesses, new businesses coming online. And what we wanted to do was to make sure that businesses have the same experience as they come. A new business comes to register, it has exactly the same experience regardless of where it is across the country. So we've rolled this out quite widely now. We have 150 local authorities using our new digital registration service. And what happens is we send that in for the user, the business, has the same user experience. It uses the same link. And then we send that information out to the local authority that is responsible for inspecting that business. But also, importantly, we can send businesses information. What we really want here is for businesses to start in a way that they succeed. So we can give them tailored advice and help on where they can go for food safety advice and information. And our ambition for this work is to have 300 of our local authorities on board by March 21. I think I'm going to push the team. I want to get all local authorities signed up to the Register of Food Business system so that all businesses across the 3 countries have the same experience. Then we thought what could sit in behind this digital registration system that could also help us to make choices about our risk-based controls. And what we tried to do was build a risk engine that would sit behind the digital registration system that would to help local authorities and advise them on the businesses that they would need to go and visit more quickly than other businesses. That has proved more difficult than we thought at the outset, because as you can imagine, with nearly 400 local authorities, there are nearly 400 information management systems within those local authority areas. So to try and interface with all of those different systems is quite difficult. So I'll talk a little bit more about segmentation when I go on to explain what we still need to do. Our next programme of work that I want to talk to you about is what we are calling our National Inspection Strategy. We looked at the primary authority relationships that businesses have with certain local authorities, and we know that other local authorities did not have any trust in that system, and they didn't really rate the advice and guidance that those businesses were getting from their primary authorities. So we wanted to really change that and make this system, this primary authority system, useful. So we set about putting some draft standards around that primary authority relationship. To give other local authorities, I suppose, the opportunity to be able to say, actually, the primary authority really is on top of this business. It knows what it's doing. It knows the controls, and there are controls in place, so that we could reduce the input from all of the other local authorities for that particular business. I think one of our dilemmas with the regulatory regime really is that individual local authorities are still doing the things that they have always done for the 30 years that this system has been in place. So they are targeting the establishments within their local authority area. The gap that we see is at a business level, there is no oversight of a business and what a business is doing and how it's doing it, whether it's doing the right things or whether there are things that it could be doing better. So there is a real gap there, and we thought that a national inspection strategy could sit in the middle and could be part of the answer. This work has been really hard. We are just about to launch a pilot, a live pilot in April for the first relationship that is a national inspection strategy for a business with a primary authority. We're going to learn a lot from that, but it's going to take us time to figure out whether or not that's going to be part of the answer for our regulatory regime in the future. Third-party assurance, private assurance, whatever you like to call it, businesses' own assurance, that, of course, is really important, and we are totally missing a trick by not using the information that businesses have and hold themselves, or that they pay for and they use within their own businesses. We're testing how that use of third-party assurance can be built into the official control regime through the businesses that we control ourselves in the FSA, through the cotton plants and the cold stores that we regulate ourselves. So we're testing this in meat plants at the minute. There is no doubt in my mind that as we decide and agree what is best to be used, there's no reason why it couldn't be used by local authorities as well. We talked a little bit about culture earlier on in the day. One of the other things that we have been exploring is there any way to assess the food safety culture within a business? You know, are there metrics that we could use? Is there a simple checklist that an official could go out and assess? And actually then the question is, what would that tell us? Would we be able to build something around food safety culture into the official control regime? So we're working with some of the experts actually across the world that are already assessing food safety culture in other places like Australia. Australia's leading the way in this, just to see if we can come up with something that might well help us to make decisions about businesses who are doing the right thing. Then It's all very well us knowing about new businesses that are coming into the system. That's about, we reckon about 10,000 new businesses a year come into the system. But actually, what about the view of the other 570,000 businesses that we already have in across the 3 countries? So we needed to build something that was able to show us the status of those businesses. And we're calling this our data hub. And that data hub pulls information from different sources to allow us to, I suppose, chop up the whole food system, to put businesses into different categories. And really what we would want to do is we would want to share that information with local authorities to allow them to make more real-time, risk-based decisions. And then in relation to food standards controls, when we did a deep dive into food standards, composition and labelling, we realised that actually the inspection regime is just broken. We just are not doing it properly. It's the same premises-based inspection regime that we have had for the last 30 years. And actually, with food standards, it doesn't really matter that we're in these businesses. What we need to look at are commodities, products, things that are disrupting the market. So we're moving to completely change our food standards inspection regime. And that will be based on an intelligence-led approach to food standards controls. We're going out to pilot that in April with 10 local authorities, so it's a completely different way of delivering food standards official controls. Now, we had a lot of, so that was all of the work that we had, I suppose, and I was really tasked with deliver some things. And then we have just had a new chief executive come into the organisation. And rightly, Emily has been asking us some really probing questions about what is this programme? What are you trying to do? What are you? What's your long-term outcome? What are the things that we need to really change here? So the board of the FSA has had a little go at thinking about this as well, and we have identified 3 key areas where we really need to ramp up our activity. So this is a refreshment of the programme, and it's also moving into phase 2. The first one is skills to do the job. The difficulty that we are hearing from local authorities is that they can't get people into the environmental health teams, into the food safety teams that they need. Even if they have the resources, sometimes they don't have the resources, which is one problem. But even when they have the resources, they're finding it really difficult to recruit. And that is a real problem for us because we need a sustainable food safety throughput of people to be able to run this system for us. So we've been working very closely with the Chartered Institute of Environmental Health and also the Chartered Institute for Trade and Standards to look at actually what are the skills that we need. Think about the tasks that we want covered, and then think about the skills that we need. So is there a better framework than a professional qualification that we can set around this to allow more people in to do different jobs within the food safety regime, the official controls. And a really key part of it is there are some very specific processes that we need to regulate that are really complicated and complex, and it's very difficult for people to build up their expertise in those. So if you think about some of the very complex manufacturing processes, could we buy in those skills to be able to help us within the official control regime? So we're working hard to build that new framework. And then I suppose fundamentally, as we leave the European Union, it's really important for the FSA to be completely clear about the roles and the responsibilities that everybody has within the food safety control system, whether it's someone working in private industry or whether it's within the official control regime. And I mean, we've heard this morning how complex this is. You know, the new ways that people are accessing food, that businesses are supplying food, the global supply chains that we're facing just mean that we have to be really clear about who does what and what contribution they make, and actually, are they being proportionate, are they being risk-based, and are they being targeted in the things that they are doing to ensure food safety within the system. So that's our next big piece of work. We're going to have to map all that out, and we're going to have to then, hopefully if we do that, then we'll see what gaps there are, and then we'll be able to start to say actually, you know, for example, private assurance will have a role to play in plugging some of those gaps, because we know that we're always faced with diminishing resources and actually having the people there to do what we need them to do. And then it's no surprise, it will come as no surprise to you that you know, we see the rising importance of surveillance and the use of data within this model, because we have to use all of the evidence and the information that we have available to us to make these risk-based decisions. And we will continue. We've been working very hard to see how we can gather this information and use it, and we will continue to do that. But we believe that a much more sophisticated way to segment the food businesses right across the system will be able to help us to target the risks. And I think this little table kind of sums it all up. As we get more data and surveillance, that will help us to build a more sophisticated way to carry out risk assessment. It will also iterate the target operating model, so it will allow us to make changes in how we basically chop the system up, so that we can make different decisions about different types of businesses. And then, of course, we need the skills to do the job. So this is very iterative, and we will learn as we go along. One of the things that certainly local authorities are very, very concerned about is that, you know, we would propose taking responsibilities off them or doing something very different or very radical. And we made it very clear at the board, the FSA's board meeting in January, that we are absolutely not proposing any major structural reform within the regulatory landscape. That actually would be just completely distracting. It would take us forever, and it probably would only allow us to have marginal gains. We all know that we wouldn't build a regulatory system in the way that it is built if we were starting from scratch. But actually, you know, it is what it is, and we have to try to make it work in the best way possible for consumers, businesses, and the regulators themselves. So I've just discussed just what we are proposing for phase 2, and we have tried and we had conversations with lots of people across the world. We were out in Seattle last week at the GFSI conference, and I think people are looking, they're always looking to the UK to see what we're up to see whether they can learn from us, and of course we can learn from other countries across the world as well. So we will be bringing the detailed the information on our new target operating model to the board meeting of the Food Standards Agency in September. And hopefully by that stage we will have been able to test it with our partners and some of our advisory groups as well. But one of the things that I'm very clear about is that we really need to future-proof this regulatory system. the regulation, the way we regulate public sector regulation and private sector assurance needs to be dynamic, it needs to be reactive and flexible, and it needs to be able to respond to all of the emerging risks that we heard about this morning as well. So we're determined to build that, you know, it could take us a little while, but hopefully I've described it in a way that you know, that you will see that we're trying to be as flexible and inclusive as possible, and building all of our work on the data that we have available to us. Thank you.
So directed to the FSA and to local authorities, as countries start to close down, regions start to close down, towns, how do we actually get around switching of labelling, switching of ingredients, and will you be able to offer us some flexibility around concessions?
Yes, we have been thinking quite hard in our organisation about the contingency measures that we need to put in place, particularly for local authority inspectors, because they are going to, you know, we're going to be faced with not fewer than ever local authority inspectors. And we have to think about where, you know, it's all about risk, you know, those local authority inspectors making risk-based decisions, and obviously we would prioritise our incidents and the things that we need local authorities to do. So we would be saying, you know, forget about your planned inspection programme for a while, and concentrate on the things that you believe are the highest risk.